Welcome friends to another r/ProRevenge video. Today we've got a crazy story of somebody peeing in a place they really shouldn't. But first, a story from Sudden Pineapple 821, how I stopped an ex-roommate from taking food off my plate. I used to live with a roommate a few years ago. She was a friend of mine for a very long time, and she had some habits I was unaware of until I lived with her. One of my last favorites was her eating habits. This girl ate like a pig. She never ever closed her lips while chewing and would always take more than her fair share if there was a shared meal. She would do things like cook steaks over and over in the same pan and leave the grease and butter in the pan on the stove in between for days and weeks, and then get mad at my cat for jumping up there to eat some of it. I never ate her cooking because I didn't trust it at all for obvious reasons. The worst habit though was taking food off your plate while you were eating. I resigned to eating in my room or outside just to avoid this. The dog begged less than she did. I asked her to stop so many times and she never listened to me. So this is how I fixed it, and also where I get really petty. There were two things I know about this woman. One, she's got the palate of a toddler. Salt and pepper on a dry butt piece of meat, ketchup is spicy, fresh herbs who? Two, she loves mac and cheese. So this is what I did. Unlike her, I live for spicy. I grow some crazy hot peppers every year and just love the feeling of a toasty mouth. I was at the store and found some pepper jack cheese. Not any pepper jack though, ghost pepper jack. I brought that bad boy home and made some mac and cheese. I went the whole 9 yards with it too, with the crusted top and everything. I waited just until she got home from work and sat my butt down with a nice plate of my spicy mac and cheese. She walked in to see me eating this stuff, and this time actually asked me if she could have some of it off my plate. I casually told her that I didn't mind at all, but just neglected to inform her that the cheese did indeed have a kick. Even for me, I was struggling to eat this stuff with a straight face. She took a big bite of it. Her reaction was unchanged at first, and then it started to twist. I think that's really the only appropriate description of that facial expression. Her face got bright red, and I watched the tears and beads of sweat form on her forehead. As she ran to the kitchen for milk, I casually said, "You know, that stuff does have a bit of a kick to it. Probably should have warned you." She came up with many new and creative insults, but she never took food from me again. Do what you gotta do. I'm just sat here hearing this story, and I'm thinking to myself, it would work for me too, not that I would steal people's food off their plates. But if you made something spicy, I'm the first to admit I'm a total spice wimp. Ghost pepper? Count me out. What about you guys? Are you a fan of spice? Do you like flaming hot stuff? Let me know in the comments. Our next story is from Usual Aware. Take my clothes out of the dryer? Have fun waiting longer? I work at a diamond mine where we live at camp and have shared washers and dryers. I always head straight back to my room, grab my clothes, and put them in the wash and dry before going for food. The cycles last between 60 to 70 minutes, so I always have a timer set for 65 minutes before I check on my clothes. Tonight, I go check on my clothes in the dryer to find them taken out, put on top of the drying machine, and they're not freaking dry, and some jerk is using the one I was in. So, I take my clothes, pause the jerk's drying cycle, and leave. Have fun waiting longer and having to run your cycle now because you couldn't wait your turn. Honestly, I feel like just about pretty much anybody would want to do exactly what OP did here in that situation. I'm pretty sure I read a story like this once where somebody took the clothes out of the washing machine or drying machine and turned around and just flung them out the second story window. This next story is from Status Patient 4436. You don't want me to cold or hold your child back? Fine. I went to a nice Caribbean island with most of my family. My uncle and his wife saw this trip as a second honeymoon and got wasted since day one, which would be okay if they hadn't brought their 8-year-old son with them. Second day of the trip, my little cousin goes straight to the deepest side of the pool with the full intention of jumping. Mind you, he doesn't know how to swim and didn't have floaties. Noticing his parents were too busy of chugging free mojitos, I grabbed him by the arm before he jumped and started telling him it's too dangerous to do that and he should remain in the kids' pool. He starts crying and his mother goes berserk, yelling at me that I have no right to scold or touch her kid and to stay away from him for the rest of the trip, or else she won't hesitate to slap me for abusing her kid. I obliged, and on day 3 when we were about to leave the hotel, the kid came running past me and knocked over what seemed to be 2 fancy statues placed on a coffee table at the hotel's reception. Of course, everyone noticed and they had to pay for the damage. Later that night, he also broke a plate in a restaurant. He was sitting beside me, but I got strict orders not to interfere. The 6th day came, and before catching our flight, we go to the beach for the last time. My parents go to a convenience store to buy some snacks and drinks, whilst my grandparents are busy taking pics. I'm alone, sitting beside my uncle and aunt, while they're sleeping after drinking a whole bottle of aguardiente by themselves. My cousin starts playing in the sand, and at some point he finds my aunt's wallet and starts burying it. I keep minding my business, and after we get to the airport, her wallet is missing. Don't worry though, there wasn't money in it, only 3 plane tickets. Yes, I know I was a jerk on the last day, but I wasn't risking my face over their irresponsibility. I don't know if I would be able to ignore my conscience enough to allow that wallet to get buried like that. But man, would I want to be doing what OP did here and just let the kid be a menace. I'd be pissed off too if I was just trying to help out and I got scolded for it. Threatened to get a hand upside my face for trying to make sure your kid didn't drown. Our next story is from OK Lifeguard 6508. Criticize my appearance and suffer the consequences. I have twin nieces, and a couple of years ago, I donated a kidney to one of them. As a result of the surgery, I have substantial abdominal scarring. I don't let that bother me, and I don't cover it up. So my nieces came to stay, my wife and I took the day off work, and we all went to the pool. We're all just chilling in the jacuzzi area. I get up to go off to the bathroom. When I came back, I noticed these young women staring at me, then they started talking loudly and laughing. I have a slight hearing impairment and I couldn't hear what they were saying, but my nieces could. Next minute, niece 1 starts crying. I asked her what's wrong, and it was because these women were laughing about my scars. As a transplant recipient, she has more scarring than me, and she's self-conscious about it. Niece 2 hears all this and decides to start crying as well. My wife heard too and confirmed that is what was said, so now I have 2 upset kids to deal with. They want to leave, so we send them off to get changed. Meanwhile, I go talk to one of the lifeguards and say I'd like to see the center manager. He happens to be an old flatmate of mine, and we work on some charity stuff together. He comes down and my wife and I explain what's happened. He goes over and talks to these women, writes a very few things down in his notebook. They all leave looking very pissed off, and he comes back over. He's banned them for 3 months from the facility, including the gym. I just think you gotta be a really scummy person to see somebody with visible scars on their back and somehow find it funny, or even if it's like stretch marks or something. I just don't even understand what would be funny about that. But I don't know, maybe these girls don't have hearts or a conscience like most normal people would. By the way, if you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below so you never miss any of my daily videos. Every video has awesome stories, like our next one from Pop Psychological 7149. Very important coworker wants me to take all the calls. Fine, I'll make you do them all. I'm male 34, recently got a pretty good job with nice pay and benefits. This including working from home when it makes sense. So I'm the new guy in the office, and the work, without revealing too much, for everyone is pretty much advising our clientele on the phone, attending meetings, and doing administrative work. It's, of course, an open office environment, which means we can all see each other. During the first months of my employment, I began to notice that one of my female colleagues, let's call her Tiffany, didn't like talking on the phone with our clients. But anyhow, she always did her job, except when she was on the call team with me. We were usually 2 to 3 people taking calls each day, and we were still expected to attend meetings, etc. Only 3 to 4 calls would come each day, and if the phone rang, we would just leave the meeting to do the call. This was annoying as freak, but it wasn't that bad. So I was clearly becoming frustrated with Tiffany. She would always log into the phone system, which directs to our work phone, late, which means I would get an unfair amount of phone calls. I had no doubt she only did it because I was new. I told her about it, and she would just roll her eyes at me and say, "Yeah, but it's only a few incoming calls today and you're new, so I'm doing you a favor." I obviously got extremely angry by this response, so I talked to the head of office. He told me that he would have a chat with Tiffany about it, but the problem just got worse after this. Now she would not only log in late, she would also log off the phone system while attending meetings, which means I was doing a totally unfair amount of calls while being just as busy as her. I was obviously very pissed off by this, and I thought to myself, what if I just turn off the freaking phone? Will the system still register me as logged in? It turned out that this crappy phone system would still show me as logged in even though my phone was turned off. So here comes my revenge. As most workplaces, we had our peaks during the year. At peaks, we would have something like 10 to 15 calls during each day, which was a lot, and the calls would usually be very long and often complicated. So during this peak, I decided to try out my little experiment. On this particular day, I was working from home and was only to attend one Zoom meeting with one of my colleagues, let's call him Tom, and doing some administrative work. So, the clock hit 10, I logged in on the phone system, turned off my work phone, and the system still showed me as logged in. The clock hit 12, I got into the Zoom meeting with Tom who was at the office. I could see the whole office behind Tom, including Tiffany's place, whom I could see was taking calls on her phone. Me, very happy, giggles. Suddenly, Tom turned around and looked in Tiffany's direction. I could see in the background that she was standing with her hands covering her face and people patting her on the back and shoulders. I asked him what was going on. Tom said, "People say she's been run down by phone calls the last 2 hours and she missed all her meetings, so she was crying because of the stress." I responded, that's terrible. Yeah, a lot of calls are coming in today." Does anybody else think that this is more just mismanagement than anything? Why isn't there like a breakdown or a quota or metrics to see which people are doing their fair share amount of work? Whoever's running this place is running it in a very risky way because one person could just kind of, by all means, skate by, and all you got to back it up or verify it is word of mouth. Our next story is from Acidic Crocodile. Violating my privacy means you'll be short-staffed. This was a few years ago when I worked in bakery at a grocery store. At the time, I couldn't work on Saturdays. Everything was going well as work hadn't scheduled me on Saturdays, and if they did, it was easily changed. Then Linda became the new store manager. Soon after she started working there, I noticed that I was scheduled to work on a Saturday. I had a second job and I worked that second job on Saturdays and my other days off from the grocery store. I went to the assistant store manager as Linda wasn't there that day, telling her I was scheduled on a Saturday. She told me to tell Linda on Friday, the day before the Saturday I was supposed to work. Don't ask me why she didn't say to tell Linda sooner, but I did as I was told because I was only 18 and didn't know any better. I let my bakery manager know as well that I wouldn't be working on Saturday as planned, meaning that the bakery wouldn't have a closer that night because we were already short-staffed in there. Anyways, Friday came around, I called the store. Lo and behold, Linda picked up the phone. I told her I couldn't work the next day, and she was pissed. "You have your schedule 2 weeks in advance. Why are you telling me this the day before?" Reasonable question, so I explained to her that her assistant manager told me to tell her on Friday. She didn't believe me and proceeded to ask me, "Why can't you work on Saturday? What's your big reason? Shopping? A concert?" She was sarcastic. I told her, "Linda, you can't ask me that. If I say I can't work on a certain day, then I can't work. End of discussion." So, I know that employers can ask why someone can't come in, but employees also have the right to not give a reason. Telling them you can't come in is reason enough. I'm totally fine telling my employer why I can't come in, but if they're gonna be snooty or rude about it, I simply say I can't make it. She didn't like that and told me that she had every right to know why I couldn't come in and that I had to answer her, or else she wouldn't take me off Saturday, thus making me a no-call, no-show. We argued for a bit, her telling me she needed to know the exact reason, and me telling her that I can't come in due to a prior commitment. That's all I told her, that I was not even supposed to work Saturdays at all, and for Saturdays I had a prior commitment. But that never sufficed her. She wanted to know why I couldn't make it, wanted to know what this prior commitment was. So I finally said it. I said, "The reason I can't come in tomorrow is because I quit. I refuse to work under someone like you. This is my 2-week notice. Have fun telling Gloria, the bakery manager, that you are the reason why she just lost her best worker." And I hung up. It was great because for my last 2 weeks, Linda would not look me in the eyes. She wouldn't speak to me, wouldn't even pass by the bakery if I was working. My manager also got mad at Linda and didn't hold back on that frustration. And if I remember correctly, not long after I left, Linda got transferred due to being demoted. I just hope after all this went down, Linda realized how gross they were being trying to force OP to give whatever that reason was up. Who knows what possible reasons would be horrifying to hear about that theoretically OP could have been busy with on that Saturday that might be traumatizing to share with their own boss. They deserve to feel bad, and I hope they do. Our next story is from International King 66, how I pink slipped my old job. For starters, I, 21-year-old male, work at a national chain that sells fragrance and candle products. On my hiring day, I listed my hours from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. as my availability. My manager also promised around 30 hours, which is perfect for my school schedule, so I thought. My first day there, the company had moved up their semi-annual sales start date from June 13th to June 10th. As a result, on my first day, even though I was scheduled from 6 to 11, already outside of my promised availability, my manager had to stay until 2:30 in the morning because the store was completely unprepared for the new sale. The first couple of shifts were not bad at all though, and I liked all of my coworkers, but then that same week, they cut my hours 4 separate times. My 30-hour week went to just 20 hours. I only made $156 after taxes for my 2 weeks. Then on the weekends, they would make me stay even longer. 9 to 2:30 went to 6 with only a 30-minute break. Thing is, I don't understand why they can't just give me the hours during the weeks and space them out so I'm not exhausted. After asking for hours on the weeks, it was pulling teeth. My schedule was so unpredictable that it would be the day of. Me leaving my house for work only to be told not to show up. As if it were just that, they require employees to be overly positive. By that I mean making sure you talk and almost harass customers, even if they clearly don't want to be bothered, as well as asking them for their phone numbers and asking why you're not asking enough. Customers who did not want to be bothered, I would have to ask them zillions of questions when I can't even stand half the fragrances. After I had a busy week of classes, I overslept. Mind you, I'm always 15 minutes early for work like clockwork. They called and told me it was unacceptable I was late. It was honestly my final straw. So, I went to my old job and posted a letter on neon pink paper taped to their window. The letter went something like this. To all it may concern, consider this my official and immediate letter of resignation. Working here has given me a large sense of anxiety, anger, and an overall sense of doom for the human race due to the customers. That's not to mention your arcane labor and scheduling practices. I could barely afford to eat last week because of how many times you cut my hours. I'm 21 years old and I have to ask my parents for help with rent, utilities, food, or take out loans because of how little you all paid me. So yes, it's you, not me. As much as I enjoy working with all of you, it's incredibly difficult to stay happy while working if you're starving. Your company has left and called me like 20 times, which has also contributed to my heightened stress level. Next time, don't promise the person 30 hours and give them 20 or 15 or cut their hours 4 times in a week. Please don't contact me after this letter. I will go silently and let's just mutually close the door. Signed, your now ex-employee. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I bet that felt pretty darn satisfying to slap that up there on the door, maybe hang around for a few extra minutes, see if somebody on their way in is actually gonna read it. Hearing that a location does something like that to their own employees, I think would make me reconsider doing any of my business there if I was going to that place in the first place. Our next story is from Careless Detective 79, Non-Profit Revenge. Don't get me wrong, I love feeding people, and I've nearly literally broken my back to do so, but enough is enough. The staff other than myself are older men, and they leave messes, sometimes intentionally, for me. Some of our volunteers, most are wonderful, are also pretty misogynist. Questions like whether raw chicken should be left out at room temp come up, and my opinions are disregarded. No one trusts my judgment with food safety, which is dangerous for me and the people we serve. Today I asked my boss why stuff is always left around and not done when I come in. He says, it's just easier for you to clean it up. So I went around before my shift was over and replicated several messes that had been left for me. Threw empty boxes and crates in the cooler, left a pork chop on the table, threw plastic bags and snack wrappers and random items around, left some rotten produce on the floor like they always do for me, also drank 1/3 of several water bottles or poured some in the storage totes, which is a lot cleaner than the rotten pepper and grape juice I've wiped out before. I'm definitely about to get fired. but I'm done being the only one that gives a crap about a clean environment in which to prepare food. Sucks to learn over time that liberal charities are chock full of stereotypes about women's work versus staff work and disregarding women when it comes to how safe the food should be. Despite the obvious sexism, they also expect me to do all the heavy lifting by myself because I'm much younger. The volunteers and staff help each other when I'm not there, but this has happened several times. The men are apparently so amazed to see a young lady lifting 50 pounds, they sit back and watch because they can't believe their eyes. So I end up doing 4 times as much work because they can't even lift their jaws off the floor. Luckily, none of this goes into the sexual harassment territory, but that's the only silver lining. Unbelievable. Even if I'm fired, I hope they shape up and run the nonprofit safely for everyone, because that should be the top priority. I feel bad for OP, and I feel bad for every person this charity comes in contact with. Considering what OP just said here, how are we even sure that any of this stuff going out to these people is safe? Do you think OP would be doing a major disservice by not whistleblowing on what's going on behind these closed doors? I'd like to know your guys' thoughts on that in the comments down below. This next story is from Satan, blasting music after midnight? No problemo. Hope you like car horns. This has been a recurring event in my life. I live in an apartment complex, and it's usually not uncommon for people to throw the occasional parties with loud music, etc., etc. And usually I do the responsible thing at times, as such, and either put my headphones on to drown out the noise, or call the police. There's been occasions when the police failed to show up and stop the racket, or when the music went on and my patience ran thin. This is my go-to move in situations as such. I have quite a few mismatched car horns. Being a hoarder, I rarely throw out the working horn when one in a pair of horns dies. And I have a robust 12-volt power supply. I suppose you get where this is going. I hook the horns up to the power supply, place them facing directly to the party, discreetly, and on goes the power supply. If you keep on playing music, I'll blast a couple of horns continuously. Whenever the music stops, so does the horns. Usually takes 2 or 3 attempts to kill the party vibe completely, bury it, and put a headstone on it, but it is a tried and tested method that has not failed me yet. Just thought I'd share. This is definitely one of those situations where you tried everything else, all there really is left is to fight fire with fire. For some reason though, I feel like if I was ever in a situation like this, there would be some kind of messed up cosmic karma where the police would immediately show up and give me a major ticket for noise pollution. This next story is from Yam I Like This. Well, I'm off to lunch. I had this little old lady come into my shop today with a huge attitude. She was grumpy that she'd come into town last week and she couldn't pay her membership because it was due last week. She came in not long after I had a long line of people, and I decided that the last person in line was going to be my last. Because I was hungry and it was already after 1 p.m. when I would usually go for lunch at 12. I turned away 3 people and told them I'm going for lunch shortly. Enter grumpy old lady. From the moment she walked in, she was argumentative. I asked her what she was there for, and it was a 2-minute process, so I said I would make her the last person before I head off to lunch. She wasn't happy with this, telling me I had the audacity to go for lunch, and how was she meant to know that I was going for lunch? But she didn't stop with the argumentative tone. I finished up the person in front of her, and she came to my counter huffy and puffy. It really rubbed me the wrong way. I politely told her, well, it seems as though I don't have the extra 2 minutes of my time to process your request. I put the placard up that says counter closed and told her I'll see her at 1:45. I did not see her at 1:45. Rude. Respect to OP, both for having the willingness to help out this person initially, and then also for shutting them down when they're just being crazy. Our next story is from Lazy Phone Tech 0, Arrogant Coworker Revenge. In the early 2000s, I was working as a service technician for a major telecom provider in the Great White North. I worked with some truly great people, and one total butthead named Steve. Name changed to protect the incompetent. Steve was a relatively new tech, but was a know-it-all. His way of doing things meant cutting as many corners as possible, so he could spend more time drinking coffee and doing nothing. He was also very, very arrogant. In his mind, he was the greatest tech that had ever lived, and would ramble on and on about how much better he was. We had tried to get Steve removed from the crew to no avail. Our supervisor knew how we all felt, but barring a major violation of company policy, we were stuck with him. One sunny summer evening turned into a heavy thunderstorm, which led to damaging winds and my personal favorite type of work storm restoration. We had a quick team meeting the morning after the storm and identified the hardest hit areas and come up with a plan of attack and designated assignments. Steve, on the other hand, wanted none of that. Steve had decided that he was going to be the hero of the day and single-handedly restore the entire community. After the meeting, the crew broke off and headed to our assigned neighborhoods to begin work. I and 4 other techs had been assigned the same area as Steve, and I was working one street over when my cell phone rang. It was Steve. He needed help. It wasn't normal for him to call anyone for anything, ever. I asked what he needed, to which he replied, "Just come to where I am." I loaded up my tools and hopped in my truck and drove the 30 seconds to the alley that he was in. I saw his truck parked and his ladder laying on the ground, but no Steve. I immediately thought he had fallen and was on the ground injured, so I got out of my truck and hurried over to his ladder to look for him. I called out his name and he instantly replied, "I'm up here." I looked up to where the voice was coming from and there he was, dangling from his safety strap and safety harness. I say, "What the heck happened?" He says, "I was trying to clear a branch off this line and the ladder slid out from underneath." Our ladders are equipped with hooks at the top that are meant to prevent this from happening. I ask, "Did the hooks not work?" To which he replied, "I never used the hooks, takes too long." He then asks if I can put his ladder back up so he can get down. Sure, I could put his ladder back up and help him down, but I had a better idea. I grab my phone and dial 911. I say to the dispatcher that a service technician is stuck in the air and needs assistance from the fire department to get down. I then call my manager and inform him of the incident, to which he replies, "I'm on my way." The fire department arrives in minutes and the supervisor shortly after that. The sirens and flashing lights undoubtedly drew a crowd, including some of the other techs that were working in the area. We gleefully watched as Steve was rescued from his precarious position, smiling all the while knowing that he had violated serious safety policy. Steve was terminated that afternoon after it was determined that he had knowingly not followed safety procedures, and the cherry on top was that I was given a safety award for calling emergency services for help rather than putting his ladder back up. For a second, I was worried that OP might get reprimanded for not helping them out and leaving them hanging there. But then I realized, I guess that isn't necessarily OP's job, and it might be seen as an unsafe thing to do to bring that ladder back up. Like, don't get me wrong, I think if OP put that ladder back up, nothing bad would have happened to OP. But technically, I think they might have followed the right policy here. And our final story of the day is from HTTYDFan96. Pee on me? Okay, here's a catheter. Not my story, but my mother's. This takes place back in 1995. My mother was a nurse for close to 25 years and has many stories to share. This one is my favorite to share. At the time of the story, my mother M was 6 to 7 months pregnant with me. She was helping out in the ER due to understaffing. Halfway through her shift, EMTs and police bring in a drunk driver. According to the cops, the drunk driver T-boned another car, killing a family of 4. The drunk driver laughed about it the entire ride to the hospital. No one really wanted to deal with him, so Mom stepped up to do it. At one point, the drunk driver says he has to pee and demands my mother take him to the bathroom. She just gives him a bedpan and tells him to go in that and that he can't move from the bed until he's been given the all clear. He keeps telling her that he needs to pee for a good 10 minutes. She again tells him to go in the bedpan. Like a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum, the drunk driver picks up the bedpan and chucks it at my mother. He then proceeds to sit up, swing his legs over the edge, whips out his member, and sprays my mother down as if she was on fire. She lets him finish before walking away. She tells the police officer standing outside the room that she'll be right back and has to get some more supplies. She goes to the locker room, cleans up as best she can, puts on clean scrubs, and heads back to drunk driver. On the way, my mother picks up her extra supplies. Once she gets to the drunk driver's room, she asks the police officer and a nearby nurse for some help. My mother tells them that drunk driver has no control of his bladder and needs to be catheterized. She asks them to help hold drunk driver down while she puts the catheter in him. Once he sobered up and realized what he'd done, he still wasn't remorseful. He was eventually taken to jail. After that, my mother doesn't know or remember what happened to him. I mean, considering everything this drunk driver did, I hope that experience was unpleasant for them. But considering they were a drunk driver and, at the time, severely incapacitated, they probably don't even really remember it. That dude is just the worst of the worst. I can't imagine how disconnected you have to be from humanity as a whole to basically come to after all that and have no remorse. If I somehow ended up doing something like that, I think I would be shattered for the rest of my life. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another revenge story that was crazier than any of the ones in this video, click on that left video. Or if you missed my latest video, click on the right. But with that said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.